I'm Chuck Miller, Education Coordinator, and I'm particularly happy to have this opportunity to welcome you to this program and to introduce to you a new learning process. The role of instructor is new to you and presents new challenges and opportunities in your career with Kodak. The fact that you've been selected to become an MEC instructor indicates that you've already demonstrated the ability to succeed in your former position. By combining your abilities and knowledge with certain new skills, you will become a good instructor. As an instructor, you will have but one objective: to produce learning. At MEC, learning is our only product. How much learning is produced will be directly proportionate to your effectiveness as an instructor. Since you'll want to be a good instructor, let's consider what makes good instructors. There are 4 elements that make up the instructing learning situation. First, and most important, is the learner. The participants, whether customers or employees, are the reason we are here at all. Our job is to see that they leave with exactly the skills and information that they need and desire. To learn, of course, the learner must be motivated and sufficiently prepared for the kind of skill or information to be presented. We'll provide you with participants that qualify on both counts. The second element of the instructing learning situation is you, the instructor. You possess the information to be transferred to the participants. Later in this program, we'll discuss presentation skills and interaction techniques that will help you get the job done. But for the moment, keep in mind that as an instructor at MEC, your role will be that of trainer rather than educator. Let me clarify that statement by defining the differences between education and training. Education provides common values, knowledge, and social skills. The focus is general and based on the premise of the greatest good for the greatest number. Training prepares individuals to perform tasks in specific ways. The focus is specific to the task, and every learner must acquire the skills to perform adequately. Chances are that your educational background, your past job experiences, relate more to imparting information by telling or lecturing. As an MEC instructor, we ask that you change your focus from teaching to learning. Be a trainer, a coach, not a teacher. The third element is the information or the skill to be taught. In many cases, your background will make you a subject matter expert. Where necessary, you will receive additional training, and prepared materials are provided to you. Also, your assigned liaison person will make certain that you have adequate information to meet the learning objectives of each session. Your primary concern will be to transfer the knowledge or the skill to the learner. The fourth and the last element in the instructing learning situation is the environment. Look around MEC. We have created an ideal environment for learning. Comfortable classrooms, well-equipped labs for practical training have been provided in a pleasant, distraction-free setting. But remember, no matter how pleasing or efficient the classroom, you, the instructor, must manage it well to achieve results. All you need is to acquire the skills and methods of instructing. And that's what this program is all about. To help you make that transition from subject matter expert to expert instructor.
Hello there. I'm Scott Perry, a psychologist. As such, my field is human behavior. I'm concerned with predicting human behavior, predicting what people think, what's going on inside their heads. Actually, all of us who are successful in life have that same concern. For example, some of you may have trained salespeople. You know that an effective salesperson is able to get inside the head of the prospect, the client, the customer, and to determine what they're thinking, how they're being perceived, so that they can tailor their message accordingly. Similarly, an effective supervisor needs to know how employees are receiving them. What do they think of me? Is my message being understood and received? What do I need to say to get acceptance, to get understanding, to get commitment? And so it is with an instructor, which is why we're here. The effective instructor needs to get inside the head of every student, determine, have I been understood? Have I been accepted? And is my student going to do the right things as a result of the message? Well, that's what psychology is all about, predicting human behavior so that we can be more effective in responding to it. And that's where our success as an instructor lies. I've been privileged to work with Kodak in training a number of instructors, and I've observed here what I've observed elsewhere with instructors, namely that they fall on a continuum ranging between two extremes, the learner-centered instructor and the information-centered instructor. And actually, all of us have to keep those two balls in the air simultaneously when you think about it. The information-centered side of us says, I've got a lot of material to cover in a short period of time, got to stick to the curriculum, got to make sure that I'm understood. That's the information-centered side. But then there's the learner-centered side. Are they understanding me? Here's one who has some questions or a look of puzzlement. I'd better stop and probe to find out where the hang-up is. I wonder if they understand one another when they make comments. And so we have to have these two concerns, just as salespeople do, just as supervisors do, we as instructors do. I think we can probably illustrate these two distinctions best if we move to a flip chart and compare two columns that show the characteristics of the learner-centered and the information-centered instructor. Now let's have a look at this comparison between the two styles of instructor, the information-centered and the learner-centered. We might start by examining the instructor's role. The instructor here sees his or her role as an imparter of information, an expert, dispensing knowledge and skills. Over here, the instructor sees the role as arranging experiences. And if you take nothing else away from here, remember this phrase, people learn not by being told, but by experiencing the consequences of their actions. This instructor has learned that. What's the goal of the instruction? Well, you hear these people speaking in phrases such as, I want to cover all the main points, or I want to define, or I want to distinguish between. But if you look at those verbs, they're all things that the instructor's doing. Over here, we're concerned with changing behavior. Or if you're still not comfortable with that phrase that psychologists use a lot, then substitute improving performance, because we're really talking about the same thing. How about emphasis? Here, the emphasis is on the teacher's performance. How did I do? How were my slides? Were they seen in the back row? Were my handouts clear? Here, the emphasis is on the learner's performance. How did they do? Were they able to complete the tasks within the required time? Was their performance in the role plays up to par? Student's role, as you've seen, is passive here, active here. Who sets the pace? Well, here the instructor does. And the problem here is that whenever you have instructor-paced learning, it's going to be too fast for some, too slow for others, and just right for the middle of the bell-shaped curve. But the instructor won't even know where the bell-shaped curve lies because we're not getting enough feedback, enough response from the learners to find out. Whereas over here, the pace is set by the learner. The instructor is getting frequent feedback on where the learners are, where they need help. And so we're moving at an appropriate pace for the group. Who does the answering? Over here, typically, the instructor calls on one student at a time. Sometimes the instructor will answer the question himself after posing it. Problem with having one student answer is, I think, pretty obvious. Namely, we typically call on the person who knew the answer first. And what happened to everybody else in the group? They're still grappling with the concept, still coming up with their answer, but their thinking process was short-circuited by calling on the bright one or the one who had a hand up first. Over here, this kind of instructor, the learner-centered instructor, realizes the value of having all the students respond, perhaps by asking them to write out the answer on a piece of paper and waiting half a minute before they've done so, then calling on one of them. Or perhaps by posing the question and before calling on someone, even though there are some hands up, stalling for time, looking around the room, restating the question, and then, after everyone has had a chance to think it through, then calling on one. I'd like to borrow from the field of transactional analysis, or TA, on some terms that are pretty well understood today, the three ego states that all of us operate on life from: parent, adult, and child. I think it's pretty obvious that this information-centered instructor is filling a parent role, regarding the students as dependent children. They need me to tell them what to think and to tell them the correct answers. In contrast, this instructor functions as an adult and treats the learners as a fellow adult. A lot has been written on this by Malcolm Knowles, and he introduced us to two fancy words, andragogy and pedagogy. I'm using some somewhat more familiar terms to describe the same thing. Well, I hope as you instruct, and as you look at the scores obtained on that profile of your instructional style, I hope that you consider these two and realize that probably we've been spending a lot of time in this column here and not spending enough time in class moving over here. And this is where the real payoff is, because people learn not simply by being told, but by experiencing the consequences of their own thoughts and actions.
The overhead projector, an easy, flexible means to provide visual reinforcement to your message. It permits you to project still visuals in a lighted room and to face your audience at all times. Participants are able to take notes, and as instructor, you can maintain eye contact with the group. The interpersonal exchange encourages questions and discussion, while permitting you to observe reactions to the material being presented. Producing the transparencies to be projected is both simple and inexpensive. The entire visual show can be produced by yourself. A number of readily available processes make it possible to convert material printed on paper into transparencies. For example, anything that can normally be copied on the Ectoprint copier can be made into a transparency. All that is necessary is to substitute appropriate transparency film for paper. Press the button, and you have an overhead transparency. You may even prepare transparencies by simply writing or drawing with grease pencil or special felt markers on acetate. The ease in producing visuals allows the instructor considerable freedom to edit, sequence, and revise instructional material. By planning in advance, the transparencies are sequenced, building to a conclusion. As each visual appears on the screen, the instructor is reminded of the next bit of material to be presented. Relieved of concern for organization of lesson material, the instructor can discuss each visual in an informal, conversational manner, avoiding the possible boredom of a formal lecture while meeting the learning objectives. The overhead projector is well suited to progressive disclosure of material. Oftentimes, you may wish to cover a succession of thoughts without allowing the audience to read ahead of you. By placing an opaque mask over the transparency, you can limit the portion being projected. Slide the mask down as you move on to each point, and they will be projected to coincide with your verbal remarks. Preview the transparencies in advance. Do so by actually projecting them. They may appear quite different than at handheld distance. Check for both legibility and accuracy. Graphics should be as simple as possible, yet clearly communicate your message. Are all of the visuals necessary? Changing visuals too often and too rapidly can be distracting. Check that the transparencies are in proper order prior to each presentation. Number or code them for convenience. Coding and any other notes to yourself should be on the frame and not written within the projection area. In the classroom, take advantage of the overhead projector's major advantage. Stand or sit fully facing the group. Position yourself to the side of the projector so that you can conveniently see the illuminated transparency. If you want to point something out, you do not need to turn around to the screen. You can point to the item on the transparency itself. You may also write on it, using color if you wish. Special markers permit removal of the writing when finished. Continued display of the image can be distracting. Changing transparencies with the projector on will produce a flash of white light that can be annoying to the audience. A technique is to cover the transparency with an opaque mask when finished. Lay the next transparency on top of the mask. When ready, slide the former transparency and mask from the projector. Another technique would be to place the next transparency on the projector and at the same time remove the existing one. Either technique will eliminate light flash. As transparencies are removed, turn them over and stack neatly. This will make it easier to keep them in proper order for immediate access. The chalkboard is particularly well suited to situations where you wish group participation. The chalkboard, with its large writing area and ease of making changes, permits presentations that are spontaneous and flexible. Topics can be developed with the groups, problems can be listed, and progress reported. And since the chalkboard is relatively informal, it encourages the desired group participation. When considering the use of the chalkboard, keep in mind two possible disadvantages. If any of the material is to be saved, you must copy it, and the material usually cannot be prepared in advance. The latter limitation can and should be compensated for with advanced planning. Plan what you are going to write. Even when developing a topic or problem with your audience, you will have a fairly good idea of the responses you will get. Try to plan for a minimum of writing. Use key words or phrases. It is not necessary to use complete sentences. Practice writing on the chalkboard in advance. Make certain that your writing or printing is legible and dark enough so that everyone in the audience can see it. Usually, you will find that printing is more legible than writing when using chalk. Practice writing or printing in straight lines. In addition to advanced planning and practice, you should develop certain chalkboard techniques to a degree that they are automatic, yet appear natural. Don't attempt to write on the chalkboard and talk at the same time. Invariably, this results in talking to the chalkboard and losing contact with your group. Rather, write as quickly as possible and return your full attention to the audience and their reactions. By extending your arm and moving across the board, you will avoid blocking anyone's view as you write. Do not toy with the chalk. As soon as you have finished writing, return it to the tray. Avoid any mannerism that will be a distraction to your audience. Use a pointer if you wish to refer to material on the board, but remember, do not block the board. Use your extended arm. This permits you to squarely face the entire audience, enabling you to point without obstructing anyone's view and speak without voice distortion. As with the chalk, do not allow the pointer to become a distraction. Either put it down when finished, or if you are going to use it again immediately, hold it down at your side. Once the material written on the chalkboard has served its purpose, allow enough time for the group to copy any material they wish, and then erase. Don't wait until you are ready to use the board again. The material is no longer useful, and on the contrary, may serve to distract. With proper planning and practice, the chalkboard can be one of your most effective visual aids. bear in mind two of the most important prerequisites for the adult learning process. Adults learn best in an informal environment, and they learn best through participation. The chalkboard provides both. The easel pad is used in much the same manner as the chalkboard. Points can be listed as established, building to the desired conclusions. The easel pad, like the chalkboard, permits spontaneous and flexible programs. And since the easel pad is relatively informal, it too encourages group participation. Keep in mind that the easel pad has some limitations. It is relatively small as compared to the area of a chalkboard or a projected image. This limits the amount of information or detail which may be shown. Also, the smaller size poses a visibility problem for larger groups. The inability to erase makes corrections or changes more difficult than with chalk. Cross-out changes are messy, confusing, and can suggest inefficiency to the group. On the other hand, since you do not erase as with a chalkboard, the material may be saved for reuse. Or by turning back pages, you can refer to points made earlier in the presentation. Easel pads are an easy visual aid to use. All that is required is an easel pad and something to write with. Wide felt-tipped markers that don't bleed through the paper should be used. Use other markers in colors to emphasize points. Avoid any tendency to list too much information. A busy or cluttered page will tend to obscure your major points. Use key words and phrases. There is no need for complete sentences. Easel pads are most effective with groups of 5 to 10 people. Proper usage will increase its effectiveness. Face the audience to avoid talking to the chart. Position yourself to either side of the chart using your extended hand to emphasize key points while minimizing blocking the audience's view of the overall material. Turn pages promptly as you move on to succeeding material, but allow enough time for the group to make notes. When turning the pages, avoid any appearance of fumbling. With a little practice, you should be able to develop a natural movement that will not distract from your presentation. Even though your presentation may be informal and spontaneous, some advanced planning is desirable. Keep sequence of important points in mind so that what you are writing supports the progressive development of your topic. In some cases, your presentation may be lengthy or complex. Notes or cues may be helpful as you develop your topic. One method is to lightly pencil key words on the easel pad in advance of the class. As you turn to the next page, the notes will be visible to you, but go unnoticed by those at a greater distance. On occasion, you may find it necessary or preferable to prepare your material in advance. Do so by writing on every other page of your easel pad to prevent show-through. It is permanent and can be reused as often as desired, with the assurance that the material will be presented in the same way each time. For most of your needs, however, you will find that building your visual on an easel pad in class is preferable. The easel pad permits a great deal of flexibility in your presentation and gives the audience a greater feeling of involvement. The easel pad provides both an informal environment and encourages the group to participate. Slide presentations are one of the most versatile and probably most widely used visual aids available to you as an instructor. Slides can be a good choice of media for any number of classroom situations. They are invaluable when the verbal message deals with objects, things, or situations that are unfamiliar to the group. While difficult, lengthy, or even impossible to describe verbally, a picture may be worth the proverbial 1,000 words. In other cases, the material being presented may require a lecture format, with consequent loss of audience interaction. A slide presentation can help hold attention, and stress or repeat parts of the verbal communication visually to enhance a long or complex message. Slides offer a full range of visuals: pictures, charts, diagrams, and virtually any graphic can be made into a slide. By combining pictures with graphics, you can highlight or point out important features, or overlay your verbal message on the visual. When projected, slides provide large, lifelike images. With reasonable care to avoid cluttering a slide, detail is relatively clear and easily highlighted. Keep graphics and wording simple. Avoid putting too much information on one slide. Ideally, each slide should represent a single thought. Slide presentations also have the advantage that they may be easily revised or updated. You can even revise and adapt the presentation to fit the requirements of different groups. Keep in mind, though, that such flexibility must be exercised in advance. Once you begin your presentation, you are locked in. Your slide presentation will provide the advantage of an outline adhering to the training objectives, but your ability to improvise in class is limited. When considering slides as your visual media, two other limitations or disadvantages should be remembered. Slides are excellent for still visuals, but should not be used if a display of motion is critical to your message. Secondly, the room must be at least partially darkened. You will lose visual contact with the audience and be unable to observe reactions to the material being presented. You will have some control over timing, have the ability to stop or refer to a slide, but lack of eye-to-eye contact coupled with a fixed format will limit audience interaction. A slide presentation requires adequate preparation and rehearsal. Project the show in advance. Make certain that the slides are in the right sequence. Practice your verbal presentation during projection. Rehearse until you are certain that your comments coincide with the slide being shown. Check to be sure that the slides actually support what you are saying. There is a tendency to use too many slides, which can either distract from your message or overpower it. Slides must be left on the screen long enough for the audience to absorb. As a rule of thumb, 4 to 6 slides per minute is about the right pace. Preferably, you will be doing a live narration during the slide presentation. In those cases where you may use audio tape, remember that attention wanders from a taped presentation more than 5 or 6 minutes long. Coordinate the mechanical requirements of your presentation with your program assistant. Arrange cues and timing of light control in the classroom. And if using a lectern light for reading, make certain that it will not glare on the screen or in the eyes of the audience. Start with a blank slide in the gate to avoid a distracting glare on the screen. If you will be pointing out details on the screen, make certain to have a pointer available. Using your arm to point will cast shadows and distract from the visual being shown. Properly used, slides can be one of your most effective visual aids. Slides should support and emphasize the knowledge which you verbally communicate to the group. Slides should neither replace nor overpower the instructor's verbal communication. Movies are unique among your choices of visual aids. It is the only aid that provides motion. For certain training objectives, continuous motion is required. For others, it may be highly desirable. Whenever motion is necessary, it may be provided in only 2 ways: live demonstration or with a movie. Since live demonstration is often impractical in the classroom, the movie is the only alternative. Special optical effects and skillful editing can actually make a movie more effective than a live demonstration. A movie can focus on the important and actually augment and refine reality. Movies can quickly present material that would be lengthy and difficult to describe in words. Manual or behavioral skills can be demonstrated as a complete process. As an instructor, you must be acutely aware of potential problems as well as the benefits in the use of movies. With adequate thought and preparation, most problems can be avoided. To begin with, you must preview films carefully prior to use. You must make certain that the film portrays exactly what you want and be thoroughly familiar with context. It is often difficult to find a film which fits your material and is not too general. Films are quickly dated by factors other than context. Instead of learning, your audience may be distracted by the humor of outdated styles or settings. Additionally, you must take care to confine the role of a movie to that of an instructional aid to support your own presentation. It should not become a medium that replaces you. Don't use a movie for a change of pace or to provide a break in your presentation. The audience will regard it in exactly that fashion. Introduce films. Tell the group what to expect and watch for. Provide guidelines in accordance with the training objectives. A discussion should follow the film. Start with questions you have prepared in advance. Stress the objectives. Help the group to better understand the film and relate it to their own needs. Some films may even lend themselves to stops during presentation for immediate discussion of important points, like this one. In a darkened room, the brilliant light coming from the screen, the movement and change of a motion picture, the elimination of most outside distractions all tend to attract the viewer and hold his attention. Still, it is not safe to assume that you have a captive audience. Attention can lag and the audience may turn off. The film must be good and relevant to their needs. Avoid showing films at times when the group may be tired. The darkened room may promote rest rather than attention. And remember that under the best of circumstances, attention from film wanders in 10 to 15 minutes. Movies have the potential to yield high levels of learning and retention. At the same time, they are most formal and fixed in their format. Making movies serve your presentation requires preparation and ingenuity. The better the movie, the harder to confine its role to that of a visual aid. Remember that communication of the material is your responsibility regardless of aids used. No matter how good, a movie cannot respond to the audience. The instructor must relate it to their needs. To communicate, there must be two elements, presentation and reception. Effective classroom questioning and listening can both stimulate and measure reception. At the beginning of a session, your questions can arouse interest and curiosity while focusing attention on the subject matter.
What is an objective?
I think it's a goal or something we
Good
want to
questions can stimulate discussion, a form of participation critical to the learning process. Questioning can steer the group to an objective, channel thinking, and keep it on track. Adults tend to build learning on what is already known. Good questions help them move from the known to an understanding of the unknown. And finally, classroom questioning can help you determine how well the group understands the material, affording you the opportunity to correct misconceptions or elaborate on points as needed. Plan your questions to be effective. Each question should be pertinent and have a specific purpose. All questions should be brief and easily understood. Long questions are confusing. The audience tends to forget the first part or fails to hear the end. Questions should be expressed in the language of the group. Avoid unfamiliar terms. If the group seems not to understand, rephrase the question. How you ask questions is extremely important because it is directly related to the quality of the response. Ask questions in a friendly, sincere manner to encourage people to express themselves. Your tone of voice is important. A friendly tone and pleasant expression will get the best reception. Avoid sarcasm as well as a know-it-all attitude or indifference, because this will alienate the group. Distribute your questions among the group, avoiding patterns in calling on people. Keep the entire group thinking. Even if you are going to direct the questions to an individual, first direct the question to the entire group, and then call upon that individual. The wording of questions can make a great difference in the quality of response. For example, how does this problem look to you? Invites actual thoughts with no need to respond in a certain way. How did you work out that solution? Gives direction to the response and encourages with implied merit. What would you say is the first step? Appeals to reason and solicits a thoughtful response. Your question should be a natural part of your presentation, not a quiz. The manner in which you handle responses will determine their value. By listening, you can evaluate whether your training objectives are being met. You can differentiate and be alert to those who may reject the material and are turning off. Make sure that you really hear what is being communicated. Give full attention. Don't be preoccupied with your own chain of thought or activities. Allow time for an answer. After all, a good question requires some thought. Wait for a response. It may take some time, but someone will usually respond. If not, redirect your question to a specific individual. Remember, one of the most common errors made by instructors is answering their own questions, eliminating any possible response. Positively acknowledge all responses.
That's a good point, and one that we can use. Now, what about
Praise
you
good
over here?
responses and avoid embarrassing those who respond incorrectly. Follow up wrong answers with more questions. If your manner is honest, sincere, and friendly, the group will be encouraged to question and comment on the material being presented. By listening to them, you will gain an insight into their past experience. You will be able to help them build new learning on what they already know. Your conduct as an instructor is the final ingredient required for learning to take place. Always be well prepared. A careless or disorganized presentation suggests lack of regard for both the group and the material being presented. Also, appearing too mechanical in your presentation can quickly turn off an audience. Establish a friendly atmosphere in which you, as instructor, share knowledge in a conversational manner. Imagine that you are instructing in a one-on-one situation. Remember that the group is listening and responding to you as individuals. Keeping this in mind can help reduce nervousness. A good way to make this method work is to use eye contact. Let your eyes roam over the group. Look directly into eyes of each individual for a few seconds, without concentrating on any one person or section of the group. Talk to the audience as you would a friend. Look at them. Start all sessions on time. Failure to do so may suggest indifference or inefficiency on your part. It is one of the ways in which you can establish the value of classroom time. Don't start sessions until you have everyone's attention. Walking to the lectern or a simple salutation will normally cause the group to become quiet. If not, ask them for their attention. Although an informal environment is desirable, a certain amount of discipline will be required to keep the program moving and to limit distractions. It is equally important to end sessions on time. If you run late, the group will become restless and you will lose their attention. If sessions run longer than 2 hours, schedule breaks. Break promptly at appointed times and resume the session on schedule. The group will respond to the model you present in your role as instructor. Project enthusiasm and interest, and your audience will respond in kind. Give them a chance to participate and display genuine interest in what they have to say, and they will listen to you. Show respect for the group, and it will be returned. When addressing the audience, your voice should be friendly, speaking in a conversational manner. Use personal business experiences or examples to create interest. Don't be an orator. Talk with them, not at them. Use clear, simple language. Choose words which will express rather than impress. Use words and phrases that your audience is familiar with, and avoid unfamiliar acronyms, jargon, and technical terms. Speak loudly enough to be heard by all. Good enunciation is important. Keep sentences short. Your posture, facial expressions, gestures, and mannerisms will also have an effect on the presentation. How your audience sees you can either enhance or distract from what is being said. Your posture, whether standing or sitting, should be comfortably straight. In terms of body language, you should present a relaxed but not overly casual appearance. Your facial expressions communicate enthusiasm and interest for the material presented. A friendly manner will encourage the group to actually respond and participate. Meaningful gestures help emphasize what you are saying. The key is that such gestures must be natural. Forced gestures appear unnatural and are distracting. Mannerisms such as rattling change in your pocket, toying with a pointer or chalk, or striding back and forth distract the group's attention and should be avoided. Your presentation skills will increase with experience and as you interact with various audiences.